Welcome to our web exclusive. I'm Mike Montecalvo, along with Eyewitness News analyst Lieutenant General Reginald Centracchio. General Vice President Joe Biden makes a surprise visit to the troops in Iraq as the drawdown is about to happen in the month of December. They'll get down to about 17,000 troops. First, the reason why he made this surprise visit as opposed to letting them know he was coming.
Probably in the best interest of security. I think between now and the end of the month, you're going to see anything that's possible to leverage anybody being there of any significance. So I think it had much to do with the security versus any kind of surprise, certainly. But I do believe the Iraqi government knew he was coming. Nevertheless, the next several days are going to be very crucial as to exactly what the mission will be of the remaining troops, ranging anywhere from embassy duty, certainly, to border control to some extent, counterterrorism measures, and actually continuing to train the Iraqi army. We're
looking like 15 to 17,000 troops, really different from what we saw in August 2010 when really the combat mission ended and we went down from like 144,000 troops to 50,000 troops. So it's going to look like there's really nobody left there.
You're right. The problem as I see it is if something does escalate, 15,000 troops does not really mean an awful lot about the entire country. When you start seeing, risings up, if you will, of different terrorism taking place within different parts of the country, 15,000 troops are not going to be able to respond and support the Iraqi army if need be. So at best, it's going to be a tremendous challenge.
What type of strategic relationship are we going to have with Iraq at this point?
I think what they're looking to, as far as I can see with Vice President Biden, is to look at what the exact relationship is going to be. Do we want it to be a trade relationship? Want it to be a substantial relationship as it relates to democracy in the area? Do we want it to be basically a footprint in the area for U.S. forces? And could it be, in fact, a staging area should something go wrong in another part of the Mideast?
So these are the variety of issues that the United States is looking at?
I think so. I think it just makes sense to me that, and as well as that, you're still going to have some civilian contractors in the area, as well as perhaps, as I'm reading too, Exxon will start drilling in the northern part of Iraq. So looking at the security of all that's still going to take place, once again, 15,000 troops is not an awful lot of troops.
General, the other worry, too, is what will Iran do now that we leave at this point, and how will they control or try to control Iraq?
Well, I'm not sure that they would directly become involved, but you can most assuredly bet on that they will try to influence those within the country, such as the Muslim Brotherhood and other agencies that might be looking to do something other than maintaining a democracy in the area. It would probably influence that and continue to support any kind of terrorism that would take place within the borders of Iraq.
There is violence that's still going on, but the Obama administration says even with the drawdown when it began in August of 2010, violence is low. But the concern now, at least where you're sitting, is now that we've dropped so much that it could escalate?
Absolutely. There's always that potential. And I think you will see that. I think you'll see an escalation of violence as we get closer and closer to 31 December. And the message would be, okay, we caused you to leave, and you're not going to go easily. So I think you'll continue to see escalation, maybe not targeted specifically toward the U.S. forces, but as we saw over the last several days. There will continue to be bombings. There'll be attacks upon its own people. And therefore, you have the challenge being placed upon security forces and military forces of Iraq to be able to deal with that rather than the U.S. forces.
You're talking about the British embassy being attacked in Iran, too.
That's correct. If you look at it, it's reminiscent certainly of 1979 when the U.S. embassy was attacked in Iran, resulting in 444 days of prisoners taken by Iran. And they were not released until after the election in that year, in 1980. So I think, not 1980, but the next election to ensure that the same president was in power. So I think what you're going to see is that still continuing throughout the Mideast, trying to find out where the weak points are, what will be best leveraged by the fact that we are leaving, and where can they make the most influence, either in Afghanistan, Iraq, certainly Iran, and now we look at Pakistan, who seems to be falling into the fray, and as well as now the Arab League took up for the first time ever a stance against Assad. And so when you look at all that's happening, and you look at a diminishment of U.S. forces and NATO forces in general, it just makes common sense that someone would attempt to use that as leverage to show more violence in the area.
So President Assad being run out of Syria, basically, do you think this is like an opportunity for him to look at this?
I think so. I think if he's smart, and there's not been a good track record of others in the same position, if he's smart, he'll probably leave. But based upon what he's seeing from his neighbors, there's not going to be an awful lot of support by the Arab League for him to continue in power.
You know, we're talking about Iraq, but Afghanistan too. And some of these troops, by the way, just so people know, they're not all coming home. They could be redeployed somewhere else. Some could be going to Afghanistan. We have local troops headed to Fort Hood, and they'll eventually get to Afghanistan, right?
This morning I went to the deployment of the 126th, which is an Army aviation helicopter unit. They'll be going into Fort Hood for the next 42 days and then further deployed into Afghanistan to do general aviation missions. So, and as much as we see a drawdown in Iraq, it doesn't mean that all troops will be coming directly home. They'll be stationed either in Kuwait or other parts of the Mideast to make sure we don't go down below a point where we can't recover quickly.
Interesting story, General. Top Afghan army and police officials who oversee really security in one of the country's hardest fought provinces, they're in California to get some training. This is like not something that's unusual.
No, it isn't. In fact, during my tenure, we established a Partnership for Peace program, meaning that each state had to adopt a particular country. And the main reason for that was to educate that new regime into how does a military and an elected government work. Many countries don't understand that. The military usually is in charge, whereas in a democracy you would have an elected office or administration, and the military is subordinate to that. That's the mainstay of a program, to show them how a military can still be very effective and yet not be in control.
What do you take of the Muslim Brotherhood emerging as the real big winners in Egypt's landmark parliamentary elections?
Surprise, because the majority of voters that turned out were female. And if you look at what the whole philosophy of the radical approach to Islam is, it really doesn't bode well to a female. And when you look at that, and they gave the majority vote to the Brotherhood, it does not make sense at all. Maybe they're coerced into doing it. I hope not. But there's always that possibility that there would be some influence on a female vote. All
right, a couple more things, General. The U.S. Senate approves the Chief National Guard Bureau to be a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We've been talking about this for the last few months. This is huge.
Now the Chief of the National Guard Bureau would have the same power, the same authority, especially for budget considerations, to affect what happens in the National Guard, rather than to be subservient, if you will, to the active Army and the active Air Force. This gives us a brand new look as to how the Guard works, where it gets its money, what weapon systems would be authorized, what the troop levels would be during wartime, as well as what the mix of the force would be, how many active Army, how many reserve and National Guard troops would go into a particular battle plan.
And finally, General, there's tension at the State House with Governor Chafee calling the Christmas tree, or the tree in the State House, a holiday tree. It's going to be lit next Tuesday night. There are many people, many groups that are going to go and protest that. I wanted to talk a little bit about what the State House has to do just for security. The State House has had quite a few demonstrations over the last several months with Occupy Providence and everything else, the pensions going on. You know, who would man all that if you're talking about hundreds of people showing up at the State House Tuesday?
Well, first of all, it is a Christmas tree.
Yes.
I don't care which way you cut it, color it, or put it up. It's a Christmas tree. But that begs a debate from time to time. Debates now have turned into some kind of a physical presence. And that physical presence, in the form of Occupy Providence, as an example, could in fact turn pretty volatile from time to time. So you could have a challenge to Capitol Police, certainly Providence Police, which is already taxed, I think, to their limit with
$9,000 just for that alone.
That's huge, relatively speaking, to the budget. And then you talk about getting the state police involved, because when the governor's there, the state police are automatically involved. So has potential. I don't think you'll see any violence, but certainly it's a concern for maintaining security during that particular time frame.
And especially with so many cities and towns broke.
That's right.
So.
Exactly.
All right, General, thank you very much for your thoughts.
See you next week.
Okay, thanks for watching.